from Knoxville, Tennessee. Interview conducted by Dr. Charles Johnson, History Department, University of Tennessee, Knoxville. Interview conducted on the 18th of August, 1987, concerning Mr. Nelson's experiences in World War II. Well,
I was born in Covington County, Mississippi, April 4th, 1916. I was working. I went to the University of Mississippi and got my degree there. I was working in operations, airlines operations, Nashville, American Airlines, and then transferred down to New Orleans, Louisiana in 1940. And in 1941, I was downtown, and I went into the Navy Recruitment Center and inquired about volunteering for service. And they said, well, how would you like to be an air cadet? I said, well, I like that fine. And so they put me through a few physical exams there and said, well, you're 10 pounds underweight. Come back when you gain 10 pounds and we'll proceed with it. So this was in about September of 41, and in a few months I had gained that 10 pounds. I boarded with a lady that weighed 200 pounds, and this lady I boarded with, when I came home, she said, well, did you pass your exam? I says, well, no, I didn't. I'm 10 pounds underweight. She said, well, I can make you gain 10 pounds. Well, I've been trying to gain 10 pounds all my life, but I never could. Well, she just doubled up on everything she fed me. I gained 10 pounds. And so I went back down to the procurement office in New Orleans. And so they gave me the rest of the physical. And a week or so later, they said I had stigmatism in my left eye, so therefore I wasn't qualified for air cadet training.
They were real tight on that.
So the officer in charge of the procurement station says, well, how about deck officer? Would you be interested in that? Well, he could have said, how about flying to the moon or something. I had no more idea what a deck officer was than anything. But I says, oh, that'd be fine. So he says, well, I'll put you in for deck officer. And he did. And I forgot all about it. From then on, I just thought, well, let's waste time. But Pearl Harbor comes along. And still, I haven't heard from the Navy. And I didn't give any thought to it. But in February of 42, I got a big manila envelope about an inch thick, and I opened it up. It said on the front, Ensign Rodney Q. Nelson Jr. So I opened it up, and I started to read. Well, as soon as I had taken a physical and taken an oath, I would have been declared officer in the Navy, which I did. And it ranked from March of 42. And my orders were to report for duty, Northwestern University, Chicago campus, May the 20th of 1942. So I did that, and I went by all of my kin, or most of them, in South Mississippi, and came on home to West Tennessee, Weakley County, Greenfield, and to see my parents and tell them goodbye. Then I caught the train in Fulton, Kentucky, Illinois Central for Chicago. And so I arrived in Chicago and was in the officers training school there in Abbott's Hall of Chicago campus of Northwestern University. For 3 months, we studied navigation, that's celestial navigation, gunnery, seamanship, communications. And after the 3 months was up there, then they sent me to Norfolk, Virginia to I didn't know what it was. They just send you and you go and report. Well, it turns out to be amphibious training program on the USS Leonard Wood, the largest passenger transport. And in this school was Annapolis graduates, West Point graduates. And the purpose of the thing was, we're getting ready to make invasions, but they didn't tell us that's what we were there for. All we were doing is learning across the board Navy operations and handling of boats. And so I spent a month there, and we had we operated every day from daylight to dark, and some operations in the dark on landing small craft off of transport ships at Leonard Wood. And we got caught in one storm there that was so terrible that they wouldn't let any of the boats come back to the Leonard Wood to be taken aboard. And so we all had to go to the shore, and it was dark, and some of the boats were capsized. And when I got my boat in, it was full of sailors, and the sailors were operating the boats, but you had to decide how to handle that boat. And by gosh, I can tell anybody, if you're handling a boat into high waves, you coordinate your boat with the speed of that wave and try to ride over it instead of busting through it. And so if you do that, you might come out without capsizing.
Were the boats bad for capsizing?
Oh, well, they weren't bad. It's how you handle. That's what you could take the best boat in the world and go busting into a wave, and the waves would collapse in on you. Mm-hmm. But if you coordinated with it, you'd ride up and over them and get in. And you'd have to turn it. You have to turn that thing, because I went to the Leonard Wood when the storm broke, and they waved us off and wouldn't take us in. Well, when I went on back to the shore, then lo and behold, I did set up a watch all the way down that beach, sailors out in the water, because some boats had been capsized. I said, well, there's some fellas that might be swimming in and just barely make it and then drown right there. So we just set up. I don't know what it accomplished, but anyway, that's training. And it wasn't too far from the truth of amphibious operations in landing under fire. So after this month here, they transferred me to Hoboken Shipyard, New York City, and this was for the purpose of converting a freighter to troop transport. It was the USS Dorothy Dix, and we commissioned it and then sailed back down to Norfolk, Virginia with it, and went into the Chesapeake Bay from the Hampton Roads entrance. And we maneuvered up there with a shipload of troops. And this is in September, maybe September, or maybe the middle of October. And so we operated with the Army personnel, loading and unloading, taking them to the beaches and so forth. But the only trouble was in the Chesapeake Bay, you have very calm and settled waters, but that's the best we could do. So one night I went on duty at midnight, and officer of the deck, and my last order was prepare the ship, weigh the anchor at 0400. So I did that. And when we pulled up the anchor, we set sail out Chesapeake Bay. Nothing looked strange until we got out through the Chesapeake Hampton Roads minefield, and out to sea there, a little piece, began to see another ship show up. And then a little further on, another ship. And we were headed in the southeast direction, so everybody was speculating where we're going. Well, I thought we were going to go on Panama Bay in Cuba for more exercises, but no one knew except the captain, our executive officer. So we kept in that direction, and then some more transports joined us. And as further on out, we got more. Well, then when we got out in that direction, southeast, then they changed direction more easterly, kind of say northeast, and we sailed there, and we picked up ships from that coming out. Now I know they came out of New York down, and they met and joined with us. Well, all during this time, at night time in particular, we sailed under zigzag formation, because the waters were full of German subs, and they were sinking. There's records of it, of how many sinkings the submarines of the Germans sunk our ships along our Atlantic coast, in the Gulf of Mexico even, on the southern shores of United States. But we never knew nothing about what was out there. But since then, a submarine commander, German submarine commander, has written a book, and I haven't been able to find it, about his operation in those wolf packs during that period of time. Well, I would have been interested in, well, where was he, when we were there, and so on. But we zigzagged all the way across that ocean, and we didn't have any trouble whatsoever from the subs. And we arrived off of the coast of Morocco. The dates you can check other places, and so I went in. Dorothy Dix went in on the southern flank at Safi, S-A-F-I, Morocco, and I was on the far southern beach. And our purpose down there was to intercept troops coming in from Marrakech, which is the capital of Morocco. And so that beach and that operation down on that end was considered a kind of an important potential for trouble. So we arrived there offshore, and we got loaded into the small boats, LCVPs, landing craft personnel, with a door that drops down. They were also called Higgins craft, manufactured in New Orleans. And so we loaded into these Higgins boats and were lowered down to the water level. And then we'd go out there, about 6 or 8 boats, and circle in a circle, waiting dispatch to your beach. Well, I want to digress just a minute. That operation, our African invasion, was written on an 8 by 11 sheet of paper, and that was it. It just was the simplest. In fact, we didn't know where we were going, and when we did, the ship's captain got out as much information as he had available, and he gave it to the different officers. And I carried in the third wave in this particular invasion, but we didn't do it on time because our escort, the destroyer Knight, USS Knight, failed to appear to guide us in because he had radar and so forth to our beach. Well, I'm glad he wasn't on time, because when it became daylight, that beach was narrow. All these beaches along this area were narrow. There's a big cliff there, and then there's a break in the cliff, and there'd be a small beach. Well, this southern beach on the south flank of Safi was out to sea. Right in the mouth of the beach were huge stones that were covered at night when the high tide was in, but not enough to protect your ship. We could have very easily have just plowed into all those obstructions which nature put there. Well, it was daylight when we went in, and we met minor opposition, but by that time the northern flank and the harbor of Safi had been captured, and that was the invasion on my beach, just very mild. The only thing I remember is I couldn't get off the beach. The waves were so high, we couldn't retract our landing craft and get on back. But I I thought I was sleeping on something safe, and I'd never seen bazooka ammunition before or anything, but they had laid out there, and I made a pallet on the wet sand out of the bazookas, and I woke up the next morning sleeping on a pile of dynamite. So,
do you remember how you felt when you were circling, ready to go in?
Well, now I'll tell you how I was single, and I was purposely single. I was a little bit older than the others. I was 25 when I went in, and I wasn't married, and I'm glad I wasn't married, because I gave absolutely no thought. I knew what I was doing. And when I was in the 7th grade, I read in the Reader's Digest many articles about Nazism and Hitler. And then, even at that early age, I said, someday we're going to have to fight him. And how true that was. So when I went in, I volunteered because the country needed to do something. I did not expect to come back, but I did not harbor on it. I did not think about it. I did what had to be done as safely as you can do it, but yet effective. Now, that was my whole idea, and I didn't go around preaching it to anybody, but I never lost my way under any of the operations in the whole World War II. And my men that were under me, they knew their jobs. They did their jobs, and they didn't have to keep repeating it to say, do this, do that, the other. So, no, I didn't expect to come back. But that didn't bother me. Now, as we go on, it'll come out clear. There's plenty of opportunities to fulfill that idea that I wouldn't come back. And so when the African invasion was over, we weighed anchor. No, we didn't anchor, by gosh. We just floated. And when we set anchor again, dropped anchor again, we were back in Chesapeake Bay, crossed again. And that was the largest successful amphibious operation in the world's history.
Did you bring wounded back with you when you came back, or
not
did
on
you
my
come
ship?
back empty?
We were empty. But now I imagine up at Casablanca, up in that area where the fighting was heavier, that they no doubt brought back wounded. Mm-hmm. Now, when I got back to Norfolk, on our way, the captain of the ship says, everyone turn to, this is your home. We're going to paint, and we're going to clean this ship up. And I really like that idea. And my division, we turned to and painted everything. And as soon as we hit Norfolk, Virginia, every one of us was transferred to some other duty. And we were mad as hops, but that's all right. So I didn't see that crew anymore of that ship. Now, I will say this, right across the hall from me, very coincidentally, I finished high school and went through school at Grenada, Mississippi. The superintendent of those city schools' son was right there on that same ship, right across the hall from me. And John Rundle Jr. took in the fourth wave, and I took in the third wave at this same beach. We were on the same ship. Well, I never saw John Jr. again. The war was over with, and I took my wife to meet Mr. and Mrs. Rundle, and then I found out that John Rundle, a short time after the African invasion, died of leukemia. So, funny things happen in a war, and you say, how can this happen? With so many people involved, but that happened. Well, right after I got ashore, and when they put all of our luggage on the deck, I'm on the dock. Well, my piece was missing. And so that was in the morning, so I spent a whole day up till midnight taking Liberty boats to every ship in the harbor at Norfolk, Virginia. And at midnight, I found my luggage on the battleship that was weighing anchor the next morning going to the Pacific. So I retrieved all my clothes. That's a fact.
But it was a job. So
that was a job. So I got my gear, and I checked in, and right soon I got a message saying you're to report to Rear Admiral so-and-so's office and for an interview. So I went. And so he asked about the African invasion, many questions, and he interviewed everyone that was off of that came back and was in the harbor at that time. So he said, well, now, have you got any suggestions or things that you think would help and improve things? Well, I said, one suggestion I think I ought to make is that if you're going to tell your men something, you do it. And if you're not going to do it, don't tell them. And he said, what do you mean? I said, well, the captain's ship said if we cleaned that ship up, that's our home. Well, it wasn't our home. And I said, he didn't have to tell us anything. He said, just clean up the ship, and that's enough. And so the captain offered me command of a ship. And I said, well, what kind of ship is it? I says, is there one in the Norfolk harbor? He says, no, there's none here. We haven't made it yet. So I thought real quick, and I said, well, if you want command of a ship, then you got to say yes now, because it's not going to come along no more. So I said yes. And very shortly, within a week, I got my orders, and I was assigned a crew. They were greener than I. Now, I've been to sea once, and every member of the crew, 2 other officers, an executive officer and engineering officer, and 30 men. And everyone, those had never been to sea at all. So there was a crew, and we were ordered to go to Boston, Massachusetts, to take possession of a ship. And so we traveled to Boston and set up there. And I thought, well, there'd be a ship that's like a taxi waiting for me. So I went to the shipyard and asked about this ship by number, and LCIL 237. And the fellow says, well, we haven't built it yet. And I said, well, when do you think you'll have it built? He says, well, we don't know right now. He says, but we've got a box. Your mail is here. I says, my mail is? He said, yes. I says, well, how'd they know to send it to me? They didn't. They said they just sent it to the commanding officer, the LCIL 237. And there was a box there, big old box as big as a desk top like this, and it's deep, and it would look like there's a fourth full of mail addressed. So I had something to do to read through all that mail. And it really was interesting to read that, because I had, in that, at one time, I was checking out gear for the whole crew to the northern climes, like England and so on. And then I make notes keep notes. And then I come along a letter that says, cancel certain orders on the northern climes. And so, you just went through it. And when finally I caught the orders, which says you are to, upon accepting and commissioning of this ship, you are to go to Norfolk, Virginia, report there, and you to take the outside route from Boston to New York. Outside means in the ocean. And then from New York, you take the inner coastal passageway into the head of the Chesapeake Bay down to Norfolk. Well, we left when we finally got the ship and it was commissioned. And when you receive a ship like that, you accept it. And by gosh, you accept everything on it or whatever is missing. If you accept it with what's missing, that's your responsibility. So I've really looked after that inventory to see that what they said I should have was there. We had everything except a log which travels in behind the ship to tell you how fast you're going, so as you can help improve your navigation. So I didn't have that, and I sent my men down and officers down to the warehouse to see if they could get it as a last effort, and they couldn't. So I went to the commandant of the district up there, and I told him what my problem was. And so, I told him I wasn't sailing without it. And he says, well, I'll see if I can't find you one. They did. He got me one. So we set sail, and it was cold. It was in February, Boston, 1943. And it was snowing, beginning to snow, but not so much that your visibility was obstructed. So we set sail from Boston and went to Cape Cod Canal. And lo and behold, we got to Cape Cod Canal. The temperature dropped to 20 below, froze in, and we were tied in that, frozen into that canal for a week or two. I've forgotten now exactly, but I do know this. It was cold as Hades. I wore double, in Boston, the Red Cross gave us wool sweaters and wool underwear, long handle, and I got a good supply of that, and I wore every bit of it. Doubled up on my underwear and doubled up on my clothes. That's right. And I still was cold. The ship just wouldn't heat up good.
Not a lot like Mississippi, was it?
No. And so when the weather broke, warmed up, we started out, and we had trouble because our water intake cooling system to the engine room was taking in slush ice and was slowing us down. So we'd have to clean out the slush before you'd burn the engine up. So finally we got out of there and on down towards New York City. And we went in to Brooklyn Navy Yard and took on fuel. And while I was there, which when we talk about there, you don't spend a lot of time. It's just in and out. Well, you're in one day, you've probably been going out the next day. So I reported for orders to see if there's any changes. And sure enough, there was changes. They changed my orders from going the inside route to Chesapeake Bay by Delaware Canal and so on to the outside route in the Atlantic down to Norfolk. Well, that's a whole lot different than going inside, because then that means you're going to have to maneuver the minefield entrance to the Norfolk Navy base. And I tell you, when you're an ensign that young, never had any experience, you don't even know what to complain about or what to object to. So we started out. And so there was some concern on my part, but I didn't tell the rest of the crew my concern, because actually there was a concern about hitting the proper buoy with a number on it that marked the middle of the channel. that's clear of mines to go through the minefield to the largest Navy base in the world. So I never said nothing to them, but I did set up a 24-hour watch, 4 hours on, 4 hours off, and there's always an officer in the chart room charting every move the ship made. So we made it down there, and lo and behold, when we got down to Norfolk entrance to the harbor, where I was looking for that buoy marking the channel through the minefield, ran into the nicest fog bank that you could hardly see your hand before your face. Then ran into that darn thing, slowed the speed of the ship down to where it was just got enough headway to keep from being swept in to the shore. Now we're off a mile or must have been 2-3 miles out, enough that you don't run the chance of grounding. So out that far into the ocean, and you're looking for a numbered buoy. Now those buoys are no bigger than a desktop. I mean, at that size and volume, they'd be sticking up. So I got every member of the crew above on deck looking for anything that would be a spot in the ocean. And we had binoculars, and we were scanning the ocean with the binoculars, just creeping along. And, well, I'll tell you, we did break out of that darn fog bank, and that was great. But a little after that, one of the men spotted a speck, black speck, out towards the sea, further out. And we went over there, and so help me, it was the right buoy and the right number on it. That's a truth. Now, you can imagine if we'd have missed that darn thing. Ocean is big. You take a mile of ocean, man, that looks bigger than that. So we reported to Little Creek, Virginia, the amphibious base that was set up. They just cutting the roads in. There's on what they call Little Creek. And then when they say Little Creek, Virginia, there was a little creek there. And that's where the amphibious base was built. And that's where it is right now today. But then it was a mud hole. And so that's how the amphibious was starting to grow. It's just growing from nothing to now we have a great, no doubt, a great amphibious organization to face the possibilities of having to send troops to a foreign soil and put them ashore successfully. Well, we hit the harbor of Little Creek, Virginia, reported in with a great deal of relief, can say that. And so we took on supplies there, still not knowing where we were going or when we were going or what. You just never was told. And so about March, 100 LCIs, the LCI, that's Landing Craft Infantry Large, was assembled there, and we took out in a convoy for Europe.
Is that a flat bottom craft, or does that have a keel?
It's a ship. It's a real ship. Okay. It's a ship. It was commissioned. Mm-hmm. Whenever a ship is commissioned, it flies the flag, and it is ocean going. Mm-hmm. So we set out in a convoy, and I still have those records of that particular. I don't know how I just lost them in my junk, and they survived. Supposed to destroy, and it was a complete operation of how that convoy of LCIs was to be escorted and go across the ocean. So we set out first from Norfolk for Bermuda, and we were loaded to the gill with food, supplies, and everything. But I do want to make this note right now. These LCIs built right here at this particular time were insufficient on food storage. meats and things like that. Didn't have a freezer room. They had two, what now is a 20 cubic foot freezer, just sat on the deck with a chest opening at the top. And so that's all the fresh stuff you could take if you could get it. And that's one of the complaints, that I lost 30 pounds in my tour of duty on that ship. So did others, because we couldn't get fresh meats to hang up in the freezer room so as we could get a proper diet. And when we'd go into port with it, because we lacked the storage facilities, we couldn't get the meat. We could get hog hanks, ankles and knee bones and things like that.
In jars.
The cruisers, destroyers, bigger craft, they get that stuff, no trouble at all. But the new ones they built, LCILs, and most of them went to Europe, to Pacific, they had a freezer room. That was a big improvement. Well, here we are. We loaded up. We loaded into the ship all the canned goods we could get, and they were stacked as neat and everything in Norfolk, and we were really ready to go. I thought it was great. And we got out on the way to Bermuda, about 500 miles. Bermuda stands southeast of Norfolk, and we got about halfway and ran into a storm, which just unstacked. There wasn't a can of anything sitting on anything but the deck of the ship. And the stuff that we had in the ship that was loose was on the floor and everything. And we still had to keep formation. I was in formation, and it was night. And when the waves were so huge that it actually twist that darn ship like a corkscrew. One direction it'd be twisted to the left, the other direction, the rear, the stern would be twisted to the right. So it was just, you could feel it under your feet. And so in this storm, I was topping a big wave. And down in the trough in front of me was another LCI coming directly across. He'd lost his position. And I real quickly gave orders to the engine room to reverse engines full speed. And by gosh, they reversed those engines full speed. And that ship just quivered, it shook, it vibrated, and it just roared, you might say. It stopped just as that ship in front of us grazed the bow of our ship and cut a keen rip about 3 feet right in the stem of our ship. So I'm telling you, war, no matter how you take it, you don't have to shoot to get killed. So, okay, we escaped that, and we got to Bermuda. Now you got another big problem in Bermuda. It's reefs all the way around it, so you had to be very careful in your steering to stay clear of those. So we got to Hamilton Harbor there, and the British welded on a plate of steel to cover up that hole, and we pumped out the bow of the ship. The little room there was where the anchor and the hoisting machinery is located. And so we pumped that out. And we were there about a week. And we left there as a group for Gibraltar. I'll just say Gibraltar. We didn't go directly there. We zigged and we moved whatever the escort commander directed us to. So we reached off the Gibraltar entrance to the Mediterranean, and we got there at night. That's a bad time to take a bunch of green. See, I was probably most experienced on my ship. I was, and the rest of them hadn't been to sea at all. Probably, I don't know, but we were there. And we supposed to go into Gibraltar, British Harbor. And, I don't know how we did it without hitting mines or something, because there was an awful lot of confusion. So we made it in there, and we were there a couple of days, and then the British gave us orders. We received our orders from the British because they were in charge there. And so I left there in convoy, and I was ordered off at Beni Saf, Morocco, not Morocco, but Algiers. Beni Saf, Algiers, the most westerly port in Algeria. You go just a few more miles, you're in Morocco. So we set in there. A few of the LCILs did, and then a few of the others went on down to Oran. A few of the others went to Arzu, and so on down the coast of Algeria there to set into port. So we were Beni Saf, I guess a couple of weeks. And during this period of time, we know now, didn't know then, the British were pushing Rommel out of Egypt and chasing him across North Africa. And our troops from the African invasion had proceeded on through Oran and was pushing the Germans on into Tunis. And so wasn't too long there. When I say long, it seems long, but it's a week. And off you go again. We went to Oran, and the old Arabian port there, ran into a rear admiral, and he stopped me and he says, Ensign, how do you like your beard? Well, on the ship across the ocean, it gets pretty boring sometimes, and so you just fail to shave, and so did the others, and I didn't object to it. In fact, I don't like to shave in salt water, and so we had beards when we reached Oran, and the rear admiral saw me. Mine was trimmed and all that, but it was Fu Manchu, and I know I didn't like it either. But he stopped me and says, well, how do you like it? I said, well, I hadn't thought about it. And really I hadn't. He says, well, let me ask you this. He says, can you keep it clean underneath? I says, well, I don't know, sir. That salt water is not too good to wash with. And that's it. We couldn't wash in clear water. You take showers and wash your face in salt water. So the next day, out comes a memoranda, all sailors be clean shaven. I was glad. I started to shave mine, and it pulled like you just pulling every hair out by its roots. So I took scissors and trimmed it off close, but it still pulled like hell. And I haven't had a beard since. And but anyway, we left Oran and went on east towards Tunis, not knowing that, they bottled up Rommel and the Germans at Tunis. And so we pulled in to Tunis, to Lake Bizerte, which was a submarine base the French had prior to World War II. So we pulled into this harbor, and the Germans had just surrendered. And Rommel, he was flown out of there by Hitler. So we missed him. And so we were there, ready to do what? I didn't know, but we maneuvered. So we were there at Bizerte awaiting orders. And when I say we were really the whole amphibious force. And those are little ships, but they were important. You cannot invade over water, land, without putting those troops in there in small enough craft. You don't offer such a big target. So you have to have amphibious.
Did you have smaller landing craft?
Not on my ship. No, my ship would go right into the beach and come off. And it was a ship. It had a conning tower and anchors and all that. And it would carry 250 fully loaded infantrymen. And they had two walkways down each side of the stem of the ship. We'd let down and the men would walk down the craft. Now, when we were maneuvering before we got to Tunis, I noticed that there were two dead spots up there on the LCIL on the right quarter, on the starboard quarter, and then on the port quarter is dead spot, right where the troops were going over. And so I asked a rear admiral there for 250 caliber machine guns to be mounted in a certain position with stops on it to fill in those two voids, because that's where you were going in and your troops would be unprotected. So I was granted, and I was the only one that had two additional 50 caliber machine guns. Now, right in the bow of the ship was a 20 millimeter gun, cannon. And then we had, 3 other 20 millimeters on the ship in different locations. But those two spots, the 50 caliber, did fill in. So we never had to use it, but they would have come in handy. I know this. Yeah. I was on the ship that had those two extra guns. Well, we're at Tunis, or near Bizerte, just outside of Tunis. And while I was there, I visited old Carthage. And I thought that was kind of interesting. But not long, just a quick, and I tell you have to be careful, because there would be sailors or soldiers with the throat slit, on the side of the road. They'd kill, and you had to be careful where you went because everybody wasn't your friend. So now we've captured Tunis, and now where were we going next? Well, I didn't know, but I know now. We bombed Pantelleria, an island off the coast of Africa, pretty close by, and it surrendered. And after that, then it began to appear even to the lowest seamen that our next stop would be Sicily. Well, we made a practice run. I didn't know that it was for Sicily, but we made a practice invasion run that night, and shortly after that, we loaded up at Bizerte and made the Sicilian invasion on time by Just prior to that Sicilian invasion, the German aircraft would come every night from Sardinia, from Sicily, from southern Italy, and bomb all those ships in Lake Bizerta. Lake Bizerta is rather a small lake to consider it, and then it's just full of ships. On one invasion, I wished I had $100 bill for every time a bomb splashed me. I was glad whenever it splashed, because if you get a splash, you're all right. But if it doesn't splash, my gosh, you don't know about it. Well, one night they hit us real hard, and it was LCIL 1, number 1. It was right over, right close by, and darn if they didn't hit it right in the middle. Sunk it, and it didn't kill a person. It was lucky. It didn't kill a person, but it sure did sink it. And so one night it got kind of exciting. I was pulled up alongside of a refueling ship taking on diesel oil, and darn if we didn't get it in to a bombing raid, and we created the biggest target in the whole lake. And next morning, well, whenever they have these raids, see, we go to general quarters and fire every gun at these planes if you could see them. Mm-hmm. And so next morning we found quite a bit of shrapnel that embedded in the rope that we had on the deck in different locations, and the shrapnel was embedded in it. So we didn't have a single person wounded in those raids, but they were horrendous now, I'll tell you. And so we finally left there on this invasion of Sicily, and we went to the Scogliti Beach. That's on the right flank of the American sector. Mm-hmm. And we went in, and the one difference now, I can point to you about how the amphibious had grown in knowledge and everything else. The operation report was only 1 page for African invasion. For the Sicilian, had grown to an inch thick with all details on intelligence and so forth. And there's one thing that caught my attention particularly was false beaches. And so what was a false beach? They didn't explain it, define it, but you had to draw on your imagination. So I visualized it right. It's a beach that is shallow, just underneath the water. You can't see it. And so you get hung up on it, then you make a good target for the enemy. So when I went in, I was on time and at the right beach. And I made if you say I was scared that I wouldn't have my navigation right. You know, I was concerned about it. So I checked my magnetic compass. I didn't have radar. It was magnetic compass. So every time I'd hit a port, I'd have my compass checked out by the Navy authorities to tell me your compass is operating properly. So we hit the right beach. And when I went in, boy, I revved that darn thing up, the speed of the ship. So I said, if there are any beaches there, then I'm going to get over them. And then I'm going to have to slow the ship down so that I don't run and drive completely out of the ocean up on the beach. So I was able to do it. But there were other ships that did get hung up on those false beaches and broadsided themselves, and the Germans, did a good job on them. So, the Sicilian invasion sticks in my mind because it was really the finest and the most difficult invasion the world ever seen, as I learned after the war's over. And so it was successful. Mm-hmm. And we returned from Sicily to Bizerta, wait orders. But on my way over to Sicily. By the way, I was taking British troops on this particular, because we were right on the British border. British is right to the right of us. So I had a shipload of British troops. And so I was talking to one of those, soldiers about, I was thinking about putting an emblem on the conning tower facing the front, of an alligator with his mouth open, spewing flames with bat wings flying, just skimming the ocean. And lo and behold, he was an artist. And he says, well, I can draw that. I said, you can. I said, well, we don't have any paint I know of. So, went to our paint locker and we had enough paint there. And so that British soldier painted that in a great big circle on the conning tower of this alligator. And I had him put at the bottom of it, the sea bat. And here's the funny thing about it. After the war is over with, and just a few years ago, I'm now 71. A few years ago, I said, I sure would like to have a picture of my ship. See, they wouldn't allow you to have a camera. Mm-hmm. You couldn't take pictures of nothing. In fact, I didn't have anything as a souvenir of the World War II. So I wrote the Congressional Library, and they said, yes, they have a picture of LCIL 237. And so I got it, and what do you think was on it? There's my emblem up there. And then on the back of this picture said, taken by Admiral Hewitt's staff. Well, you know, it's against Navy regulations to put things. Now I know, see. But coming out of West Tennessee, duck hunting, fishing, going barefooted, swimming in the creek, things like that, you don't think about a picture harming anything. I says, the aircraft put their, paint theirs up. I said, I'm going to put this up, and I did. And so the Admiral let it stay, but I do know that he took a picture of it. And it's like I was posing. He got up close and took this picture. And I had lots of them say, where'd you get the idea? I says, well, there's no idea to it. I says, over there to the west of Oran is a big rock cliff. And those sea bats are flying in and out of that rock cliff. And so I said, that's where they came from. So after this Sicilian invasion.
Did you go in at night or was it during the day?
We go in the morning. Dawn. At dawn.
Pretty stormy.
All those invasions, just as soon as if you can hit it at early morning, then that's the best time. Mm-hmm. You can see well enough, but they can't see too well themselves, the enemy. Okay. So we go in on time, and I've always had a habit of being on time. And for this interview, I want to mention, Dr. Johnson was on time, but I was on time checking to see if he was on time, and we were. So, okay, when you make those invasions, those ships, I talked to the skippers of those ships, LCIs, who weren't on time, and they were the ones that ran into trouble. And particularly one that got shot up on the Sicilian invasion is on the far left flank from me. I was on the right flank and he was on the left flank. And so he got, broached on the beach and couldn't get off, and they shot him up real good. So I learned if you stay on time that your chances of getting out were much better, and that's where it proved to be. So got through that Sicilian invasion, went on back to Bizerti, and now I'll just jump ahead. The next invasion is Salerno, Italy, but we didn't know. We just kept maneuvering. We kept training. We trained troops. We trained, run through training exercises for the Navy personnel, and make training amphibious runs at nighttime, check your navigation things. So when it came time to make this Salerno invasion, They didn't advertise it at all. They never do tell the regular seamen. The only time I ever learned that an invasion was being made was when I'd received the operation report and I signed for it. No one's to see it except me and the person delivering it. So that is how I learned about it. Well, I was actually in the local hospital. I had a little infection in my eye, and so I was released from there with a patch over my eye, and I got my orders. So we just went on and joined the convoy and went to Salerno. Now, this was really a bigger operation than Sicily, and the operation instructions, that was good 2 inches thick. I wish I'd have kept those, but I was supposed to destroy them, and I did, because the enemy got a hold of them. Then, of course, that would divulge a lot of secrets, maybe. So here we are on our way to Salerno, but we didn't know. And I'm carrying British troops again. They divided that Salerno beach. The north half of the beach was British. That took in the city of Salerno itself. And then the Americans were on the south half of the beach.
What did you think of the British?
British, good soldiers. I really liked them. Why? Because here we are, 18, 19, 22, 23, like that. And say, by the way, the crew of my ship came from Iowa, came from Brooklyn, came from Mississippi, came from Tennessee, came from West Virginia, came from Indiana. And it was just a smorgasbord of America. That's what it was. And they were just high school. Some of them had 6th grade education, more, but you can teach them if you take time. So, here we are to make our landing at Salerno at dawn, and the orders really detailed this time. Here's the order of the thing was to proceed like this: shelling of the beach at a certain time, and the rocket ships to go in at a certain time, and so on. Well, on the American side, they, for some reason or another, canceled out the shelling of the beach. The generals told the Navy they didn't want the shelling of the beach. But the British went ahead with the shelling of their beach and using their rocket ship to blast through what was ever obstructing from the beach's edge on in. And so I was on the British side of the operation. So I didn't know that until the war's over and I read the Navy account. And so I do know this. When my orders showed certain things to occur, I noticed on the American side there was absolutely no firing. On the British side, they were firing in. You could see the flashes on the beach. Well, the invasion took place, and with even the blasting of the beach and so forth, even on the British side, didn't do a whole lot of good, but it did help some, because on the American side, they got to the beach's edge, and the beach was just solidly laid with mines. And there was these soldiers piling up on each other, blowing themselves up with those mines. The British not too much better off. But that's the way they went into Salerno. The first day, we didn't go too far, and so I was given my orders. My orders said, you are to remain at Salerno until further orders. And really what it ended up, I was there for the whole 10 days, from beginning to the end. So my next job was whatever they would call me to do. Well, the first thing after landing my troops, I received an order to go to Maori Beach. They didn't tell me where it was, where to find it, and remove wounded Rangers. Well, Rangers is a new word to me too, because they don't tell you everything. You just got to piece it together. So I got charts out and started looking for Maori. And there's one thing for sure. If you don't know where you are, then you're not going to find where this other place is and how to get there. So I didn't know where I was. So I searched and I found Maori over on the extreme left flank around the peninsula. And the Rangers, that's American commandos, went in on this infiltration attack on the left flank and did well, but they ran into a whole lot. I've learned after I read about it, they ran into a lot of opposition, had a whole lot of wounded, and I was ordered to go over there and remove those wounded. Well, I went to Maori and we removed 2 shiploads of Rangers, and they were in all conditions. We weren't a hospital ship, so we bedded them down with all of our blankets and things that we had on ship and fed them. We came back, we thought we'd have a hospital ship there, but it wasn't there. So I had to hold those wounded overnight, and the next day a hospital ship came into the area, so we unloaded those, and my next orders was for throughout the operation to lay down smoke screens. And so whenever this beach at Salerno is quite shallow, and right behind it is a high mountain. And this mountain had tunnels in it for roads and railroads, highways, and so on. Well, the Germans would put their mobile guns in those tunnels and come out and fire and then go back in. And so whenever they'd start firing, then I'd start laying the smoke, and you can't lay the smoke and get in behind it too. So you go out in the broad daylight. So I laid smoke screens throughout the whole 10 days I was there, and I ran out of smoke pots. And then what do? You don't manufacture them. You can't go down to the corner store and buy them. So I thought about, why not just go out to these merchant marine ships? It's just laying way off yonder, safe distance from the fire, and get their smoke pots. Well, they were glad to give me all the smoke pots I wanted. So we had plenty of smoke pots, and we laid smoke. And at nighttime, we had, from the very beginning, air raids and in daytime on the beach. And the third day we were there, our troops had only advanced about a mile and a half or something like that inland on the entire front from British on the left flank, with Americans on the right. They moved in that much. Then there was a creek, a stream of water divided those two sectors. And the the Germans, came down that divide, that creek, and were pushing for the sea. And on the third night, they came within a half mile of breaking through. And so that really was critical at that particular stage. They brought in troops all on destroyers, anything they could get in Africa to get those troops here quick. So we were unloading troops all through the night, getting them on the beach to shore up this counterattack the Germans almost pulled off. This narrow beach where we were, there were German prison pens all along it. It was kind of like, it wasn't, in other words, it wasn't a nice place to stroll around on. But our ship and our duty was to go in there with the troops or whatever occasion called us to that. And so that's what we did. And that's amphibious. Now the different amphibious craft run run like this. LST is the largest. Now that's a great big, really is a great big ship that's quite plump, that carries tanks, it carries trucks, it carries the whole, maybe a regiment of men. I don't know. There's a whole lot. They just loaded up. Now that's the biggest. And then the next in size was a LCI, Landing Craft Infantry. And those are ships. They're commissioned to fly. Now, they fly the flag. And next is an LCM, is a big flat barge. That's really what it is. And it is brought over on the deck of those LSTs. And that's the next size. And the next size is an LCT, Landing Craft Tank, which carry a truck or a tank, or you can put soldiers in it. And the LST, the bow opens up, just opens up from the water's edge, right open, and then a ramp, and they run their craft out the ramp. The LCI does not open up at the bow. It has two walkways on the side that are mobile, that slide out to the front and down into the water, and the men run down it. And the LCMs, they have a drop front on the bow, which is flat, and it drops down into the water, a door, and then it's pulled back up before they get underway. An LCT, Landing Craft Tank, is similar. Its front bow is blunt, and it drops a ramp down and to unload its troops. And then next you have the smallest was the Landing Craft Personnel, and that was a Higgins boat, or it's just carried about 35, 36 troops, and its bow dropped straight forward and pulled up. Now, nowadays, if I went into the Navy, I wouldn't recognize none of it. They don't use those crafts now because every war is fought differently. Every situation can't be solved with the same type of equipment. And I will say this, by gosh, and Defense Minister Forrestal, he was our first defense minister, and he said in his letter that we won these, never lost a single invasion in World War II from Atlantic and throughout the Pacific, and that's true. And so they learned from one step to the other. But most of the learning was done right over here, Africa, Sicily, and Salerno. Now, I will jump real quick to after the Salerno invasion. A month later, I was on operation with 5 other LCIs out of Catania, Sicily, and we were to report to Taranto, Italy, over in the heel, right in the instep where the heel is, and that's the largest Navy base of the Italians. And we would report there, and we reported and picked up, I did. I don't know what the rest of them picked up, but I picked up British commandos of the Black Watch, the British Black Watch, shipload of them. And we were headed back at dark, and the sea was rough. The storm clouds were hanging in close. Sea was getting pretty rough. And darn if my ship didn't hit a mine. And it blew 45 feet of that ship just as clean away as you take a saw and just saw right through the 1/3 of your desk and just cut it across right on a straight line.
So bow off?
Yeah, bow off clean. And I was the last ship in the column. There were 6 ships, LCIs, and there were 2 sub-chasers with us. And so the bow watch, the Navy man was right up there in the bow to watch for things like that. But gosh, he couldn't have seen that. Nobody could have. But we hit that mine, and here's what it feels like. Get a brick wall and get back about 30 yards, something, and run just as hard as you can against that wall. You're not going to move the wall at all. And that's what it felt like. Now, I was there. I was in perfect position directly behind the ship in front of me and hit that mine. And that knocked that ship up into the air completely. And when I was going up, it flashed through my mind real quick. Well, buddy, you're going to have to swim. Because, you go to sea, you're going to have to swim sometime if anything bad happens. If you fly an airplane, anything bad happens, you're going to have to parachute or crash. So, no kidding. It went through your mind. It's funny how things, or if you thought about it before, it comes back to you in a flash, quick. So, okay, up in the air, I don't know where I was. And so I landed back on my back, and the deck is not level. It has steps. Your compass is right in the center, and it's on a little pedestal, and you step down a step, and you're on something else, and so on. So when you landed like on stairs. And so I landed, and when I landed, I tried to get up, but I couldn't. The water was coming down in such mass, it couldn't stand against I couldn't get my body up against the weight of the water. So I says, well, the darn thing is flipped over on its side, and water's pouring in. Well, your mind just flipped that way. And so when that water quit coming down, I got up. That ship had settled back down just as square and as flat as your foot on the ground. And so, of course, that was fortunate because now we had a chance. And so the engineering officer, and the executive officers, they were in the bunks waiting there. We're 4 on, 4 off. That's the way I set it up. So the engineering officer came up to the conning tower, and I told him, I says, check real quick and see if we're taking on any water and stop it. Well, he checked real quick and came back and says, we're taking on some water in the bow section, what was left, and we're pumping it out. So, okay, that settled that. So we weren't going to sink right away. So then, you never knew when it was going to sink. So the radioman came around, and he was supposed to gather up all the secret material. He came around and says that he had gathered up and put into this bag all of the secret material, code books and so on. Okay, that we took care of things that had to be done, and the 45 feet section is blown off completely clean. Against orders, I turned on the searchlight and lit and swirled it around to see what in the devil was around the ship. And it was just a mess of destruction. And soldiers out in the water. And so we started to do the next thing, look after men. And one of my sailors, unbeknownst to me, he dove overboard and saved the life of a black watch English sailor. Well, I put him in for an award and never heard from him, not at all. And so the executive officer, he looked after the removing or pulling out the wounded, and he pulled out 5 to 10 that were still alive. And the 2 sub-chasers, they were there, and one of them reported that it was a hospital ship, no kidding. Now, we were out at sea. I don't know how in the world that happened, but there was a hospital ship lit up, and so they took those wounded troopers to the hospital ship directly, just like as though in Knoxville, you run the ambulance right over to the hospital. So we did get these wounded, and there were about 25 or 30 wounded, and there were 30 dead when the last report by the British Black Watch captain. He gave a full report, and there were 30 British commandos killed in that explosion. One American sailor, the bow watch from Georgia. He, of course, was obliterated. And so when we removed the wounded, then the other LCIs came in, and two of them squeezed in on each side and towed LCI 237 to Catania, Sicily. And we sat in there with the thing afloat. And then a week later, were towed by a seagoing tug from Catania to Palermo, which is up in the northwest corner of Sicily, to a shipyard. And we could get underway, the engine room still operating, but the only thing that saved our hide was this, and I still haven't been able to figure it out. Here you are right now, if you've been reading in the local papers, as of now, the mines in the Persian Gulf. Now that's flat. It's just as calm as the top of the table. You can see those grand rascals. Now here we are in a rough sea at night, and this mine hits right directly on the stem. Now if it had hit 10 feet to the right of the stem or 10 feet to the left of the stem, that mine would have exploded into the center sections of the ship, and the ship would have sunk completely. And so here's this mine, if it's true, hit right directly on the stem. It blew off right straight across, perpendicular from side to side, 45 feet of the ship. Now, I thought that we were in Palermo, not Palermo, but
Toronto?
Yeah, Toronto, and that's the biggest ship, Navy port that the Italians had. And the Italians were famous for frogmen, underwater demolitions, and all that. We'd been warned in our intelligence report on that. I believe that while we were there picking up these troops, commandos, that a frogman or some frogman from the Italian, and again, the Italian Navy was very fascist. They didn't, they were still fighting the war against the Americans. I believe they went underneath that ship of mine and just plastered the bow with plastic explosives and put a darn timing fuse in there to go off later. Because it blew off so square across, and I remember the ocean. I was having a hard time keeping my position in column directly behind the ship in front. It was a hard thing to do because the sea was so rough. Well, anyway, I shouldn't be here, and all the rest should be here by, by the averages. But we did. And when we got to Catania, we had to clean the ship up. And we had to use flat-nosed shovels to shovel them out. Dead bodies. They're just a regular hamburger. That's what it amounted to. And we hosed it down with all kinds of chemicals, and that smell was there for a long spell. Now, right after this, we were there a month and nothing happened. They didn't tell us they're going to do this to the ship. They didn't tell us they're going to do nothing to the ship or what. And so I got kind of itchy, and I said, well, I'd like I think I'll put in for PT duty. I had some experience now. And I says, hell, if I'm going to get killed, I might as well have a shooting chance.
Shoot back, yeah.
Yeah. And so I put in for PT duty. And, by gosh, instead of getting PT duty, they sent me to the advanced amphibious training base. And I didn't know, of course, now I know they were getting ready for southern France invasion. Mm-hmm. So, I went to that duty. And first that was Arzu, Africa. And then from Arzu, we went to Salerno real quickly. As soon as the Germans would run out of Salerno, then they set that base up there. So we went to Salerno, and I still didn't know, other than we were just training amphibious troops and training sailors. So went to Salerno, and a little while later, I met an admiral there. One afternoon, we were in the Fisisti building, and on the roof, it had a officers club up there, slate roof, and you could look out to the sea out there. And so I was out there just looking around, and this admiral came up and started talking to me. He asked my name, and so I asked him what his name was, and he says, I'm Admiral Moon. And I didn't ask him where he's from, but we had a nice conversation, and I didn't. Of course, they don't tell anything, but I later find out. See, he was a task force commander of the Southern France naval invasion. Task force commander, and so the Southern France invasion was taking place right there. I mean, the planning and everything right there. And then later, I married my wife from Kokomo, Indiana, Wilma Abbott, and that's where Admiral Moon's from. Yeah, and I have his World War I history, because the superintendent of the Kokomo, Indiana City Schools wrote up a complete history of all the World War I veterans, and Admiral Moon was in there, name for name. So, I mean, it's just a coincidence again. And you just hardly believe it. So I'm here in Salerno, and while I'm there, we're just training every day, daylight to dark, 6 days a week. Sunday we even worked on Sunday times, but what of it? It's pretty boring if you don't have nothing to do. So I did make one trip to Rome after they took Rome, but before they took it, we trained a division of troops. I ran into an old schoolmate of mine from Mississippi. He was captain of our artillery company, and so of all things, running into him, and he invited me out to chow with him and supper. So that was an experience, because they don't have dining rooms and things. So the Navy's pretty, even on that LCI, as poorly as it was, facility-wise, it was a far better than what the soldier was out in the field. So, Peelahatchie was his nickname, Peelahatchie Russell from Mississippi. And so I got talking to him, and I says, what group is this? What division? He says, this is the 88th Division. I said, where you been all this time? He says, well, we've been training in the United States for 3 years. Mountain, desert, you name it. That's where we go. I said, it's confidential. I said, what you over here for? He says, we are to break through to Rome. Anzio Beach has been opened up, see, and it's stalemated. So here they brought in 2 divisions, 88, I remember. The other one I don't remember.
Probably 10th Mountain.
So those 2 divisions, by the way, we trained them a little bit on amphibious techniques of this, that, or the other. And so they went into Anzio and they took Rome. They really did. 88th was the leading division into Rome. And while I was in Salerno, I made a trip up soon after that to Rome for a week. Stayed at the arena and the facilities built for the Olympics that were to be held in Italy, but they never materialized. So I stayed there a week, and I saw every cathedral in town. And I got there as they opened up this cave, huge cave, with about 300 Italians stuffed in there, and they dynamited the opening. I was there. I walked in that place. This guy was driving our Jeep around. There's another officer went with me. We saw the whole thing. It was sickening. But had another coincidence. A captain at the University of Mississippi, he next door roommate. He right next door to me. And I run into him, of all things. His name is Montgomery. So after that trip, that's the only vacation I had, was that trip to Rome. And we went on back to Salerno and continued to do what we were doing, not knowing there's going to be I felt like we ought to have a southern invasion of France, but it never came up. Nobody would talk. Nobody would say nothing. They kept secret, and that's good. I did notice this. Into Salerno was coming facilities or techniques such as underwater demolition teams, and this is a guy from Mississippi State, captain of that, and other armed forces that we'd never used before, and even at Salerno. See, they were adding to it. So I was talking, and sometimes we have bull session, and I told him, I said, "Oh, I've never seen so much new troops, new different types of troops as are here now." And I said, if they use those, then we'll go into southern France slick as a greased pig. And really, that's what happened. As a fact, we didn't have any trouble, and we went in there to southern France. And soon as Marseille was cleared up, then Salerno was closed down, moved personnel, me up there to Marseille, France. And there was a huge area just completely demolished. Right at the harbor, the Germans dynamited every bit of it to locate. They couldn't locate these radio broadcast stations. They couldn't find them. They knew they were there, but they couldn't locate them. So this dynamited the whole thing. It looked like a mile square. So Marseille was a mess. And they began now to move into Germany over the Rhine. So my numbers, I could have long ago, come in home on my numbers, but I just stayed. And a fellow there who was an underground fighter for the French gave me an album of German photographs, and in it was a picture of Rommel in Africa. So I really appreciate that, which I still have.
You said you were scheduled to go to the Pacific?
And then when the Mount Vernon big troop transport came in there and took me back to Boston, of all things. And I'll never forget my first meal in Boston after this tour of duty overseas. The waiter at the cafe brought in sweet milk. I drank, I guess, 2 quarts of that before he ever got the meal onto the table. Really the best tasting stuff. So, yeah, came into Boston. I called my family. And, of course, they were happy. I was happy. And then they sent me from Boston to Olathe, Kansas. Now, Olathe, Kansas, right outside of It's a naval air station. It's right outside of Kansas City. And it was the command, Naval Transport Command was located there, headquarters. So that's where they flew officers and enlisted men to the Pacific. So I didn't know that. See, they just don't tell you those things.
You just are part of the machine.
That's right. And when it's all over and the reports come in. So what y'all are doing here, if it's properly done, will be of great value to the future generations. And for this reason only, if nothing else. They'll know, well, Daddy was here and so forth. And he was there for a reason. So, well, I was there at Olathe, not knowing what really I was there for. But I do know that my duties they assigned me was concerning the dispatching or planning the outgoing and reporting in of the pilots of the incoming troop transport, see. And so I began to, kind of piece things together. And finally caught on to the idea that they give them a little resting period. After a couple of years over in Europe, they say, well, you can give him a little more time or something like that. I know that's what they were playing on now. But then I didn't know. And eventually the atomic bomb was dropped. And as soon as that was dropped, then that shut down the war in the Pacific. And then I was sent to Bunker Hill Naval Air Station right north of Kokomo, Indiana, about 10 miles, something like that. And so I was pretty happy that I, came back all in one piece. I thought I was in one piece, but it wasn't all together.
Did you get beat up from that?
Yeah, I did. And I didn't know about that just a little later. I came back to Kokomo, and the first Sunday, I'd already said, when you're in a war fight and you don't know Sunday from Monday,